That has been the Monaco Grand Prix for 2022, and what a mess that was, eh? Can't believe it. Alright, we'll start off with qualifying. There's a bit to talk about there, and then we'll get stuck straight into the race. So, the problems start as early as Q1 in qualifying, where Tsunoda has a little bit of a prang, but he's able to keep going. And then a red flag flies. It seems like an erroneous red flag. You don't stop qualifying just because somebody's crashed into the barriers, then kept going. Tsunoda's car was actually pretty easily repairable, and he was back out in qualifying again later. But yeah, we had a red flag with 2 minutes to go, which did ruin some runs. So Gasly especially, I think, is going to be pretty angry about that. So out in Q1, we had Zhou, Latifi, Stroll, Gasly, and Albon. Q2, there was no real instance like that. Out in Q2, we had Tsunoda, Bottas, Magnussen, Ricciardo, and Schumacher, which meant Vettel put in a great lap to put his Aston into Q3, and both Alpines were doing particularly well too. Then we had a few incidents on the final runs in Q3, little bit dramatic. Perez crashes on his final Q3 lap. Sainz spins at the exact same location. They crash into each other, the carcasses of their cars. Alonso also crashes on his final run. It was a bit of a crazy time, to be honest. I tell you what though, Perez looked incredibly fast in qualifying. Sainz looked incredibly fast in qualifying. But it was Leclerc that took pole position with a banger of a lap. Sainz made it an all Ferrari front row. Perez's first run was actually good enough for third place. And Verstappen was all the way down in fourth. He never really looked like he was quick at all during qualifying. Very strange for him. On race day itself, it was a bit of a mess. Once again, the FIA delayed the start of the race because rain was incoming. It wasn't actually falling too badly when the race was due to start, but rain was due to fall harder a little bit later, so they decided to delay for that reason, which is very strange to me. Surely you want to get racing as soon as possible, even if it's just for, 5-10 laps and then red flag it then, right? But whatever, this is what happened. We did have a formation lap behind the safety car, but then the cars came in and red flagged the session. We then did finally get underway over an hour after our due start time. We started with a rolling start with all cars on full wet tyres. Latifi and Stroll actually hit the barriers behind the safety car. They both continued, but they both needed to pit. The safety car came in on lap 3 and we went racing. It's interesting at this point because Gasly, Stroll and Latifi went on right away to put on inters. Obviously they're down the back of the grid. They can afford to take a little bit of a gamble. So they strapped on inters. It was a little bit too early at that stage, but conditions did start coming to them. And our first on-track overtake happened on lap 12. Of course, this is Monaco, where not a lot of that happens, so it took to lap 12. And it was with Gasly. Gasly was providing all the entertainment early on his inters as he was trying to get past these wet, weather-tired cars. On lap 17, we saw Perez pit from 3rd place to put on his inters. He came back out in 5th place. This caused Leclerc and Verstappen to pit on lap 19 for their inters, and Sainz actually called in on the radio and said, "I'm staying out and we're going to hang on and I'm going to put on slick tyres." So he decided not to go for inters at all, while the other 3 around him had. Those pit stops actually had Perez jump Leclerc. So Perez had moved up to 2nd behind Sainz. Obviously Sainz had stayed out, he's in the lead, but Perez jumped Leclerc at that stop, so he's running in 2nd now. The first of the front runners to pit via the dry tyres was actually Ferrari. Sainz and Leclerc double stacked on lap 21 for hard tyres. There was a little bit of confusion over the radio, especially on Leclerc's end. They told him to pit, they told him to not pit, but he was already in the pits. So a little bit of confusion there. I'm sure they'll talk about that after the race for sure. But whilst they were doing that, Perez and Verstappen were bombing around on their inters, putting in really good laps. They pitted for hard tyres on the next lap, on lap 22. As a result of that bombing around earlier, Perez retained the lead. Perez came out on hard tyres in front of Sainz. So Perez P1, Sainz P2, Verstappen P3, and Leclerc was the big loser, coming back out in P4. He was on pole position for this race, I'll remind you, and now he's in P4 with tyres that could have potentially gone to the end. At that point, the top four were nose to tail with each other. It was, quite an interesting battle to watch, see these cars follow each other, but it's Monaco, so no overtakes were ever going to happen, I don't think. We did see a huge crash from Mick Schumacher on lap 27. He walked away, thankfully, but it did result in a red flag. It was one of those scary crashes where the back of the car detaches from the front of the car. I know that's how the cars are designed these days, but it still looks scary to see, doesn't it? We get underway again with a rolling start. Questions being asked the FIA once again. Why weren't we doing a standing start? It's a dry track at this point. And also at this point we know it's going to be a time limited race rather than a full lap distance. So the full lap distance was 77 laps. There is a mechanism in place if a race is taking too long. For instance, if there's red flags that add a bunch of time onto the race will cap out at 2 hours, just to make sure we're not racing forever. Hey, so we did know at that point we would hit the 2-hour limit before the 77 lap limit. However, we were going to go over 75% of the race distance, which meant full points would be awarded. So that's good news at least. Once we got going again, the Red Bulls emerged with fresh medium tyres, while Ferrari stayed on the hard tyres. And the field was split roughly 50-50 between mediums and hards. Very interesting, as we were going for around 30 laps. And that's a big distance on these medium tyres. So it was a big gamble, and I thought it was going to be interesting to see how it paid off. Of course, with the rolling start, it was rather processional. There wasn't really any action going on up and down the field. We did see Alonso in 7th going so slowly that he bunched the entire field behind him, which was more comical than anything because nobody could overtake him, and he created such a huge gap. Such a huge gap. It was interesting, but then he managed to nail on the power later in. Obviously, he was just taking care of his tyres, taking care of his car, doing his race. And then he managed to bang in like 115 times. It was quite funny. With 10 minutes to go, we were back to the top 4 nose to tail with the Red Bull's medium tyres kind of going off a little bit, and obviously the hard tyres of Ferrari starting to play into their advantage. Again, it's Monaco. As much as thrilling as it was and as close as they could get, there was never going to be any overtake there, I don't think. Sergio Perez wins the Monaco Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz finishes in 2nd and Max Verstappen in 3rd. Charles Leclerc, the hometown hero, sadly finishes in 4th. This is the first Monaco Grand Prix he's ever finished, so small consolation there for him, but he started on pole. He will have wanted to win. He had the car to win. It just didn't favour him. George Russell continues his run of finishing in the top 5 of every race with the 5th place. And Lando Norris actually took the fastest lap in his 6th place finish. So overall, this race had a lot going on. It was a very complex race. There was a lot happening, but not all of it, or not any of it really happening necessarily on track. It was all to do with off-track stuff. Like I said though, we did go over 75% race distance, so full points are awarded for this race. Red Bull will be happy. Sergio Perez in particular will be happy, especially after what happened to him last time out, where he got team orders to move over for Verstappen. Not this time. He wins the Monaco Grand Prix for Red Bull. So what did you guys think of the race? Or rather, what did you think of the everything surrounding the race? Let me know in the comments. Let me know over on social media at Race Report Pod, and I will catch you in the next one.